In part 5, we looked at the McMorran complex, and because of time restrictions on the video length, I didn't quite finish it. There's a couple other things I wanted to share with you. The first is that we still have a small piece of history from the courthouse today, and that history is located in front of the county building right here. That's the bow that was in the courthouse. And secondly, I want to show you a couple more pictures of the Port Huron High School gymnasium. Here we see some folks waiting outside the gymnasium, probably for some type of event, probably a sporting event. And then the inside of the gymnasium we see here. The first picture here is of the girls' phys ed class playing volleyball. In the second picture we see the Port Huron High School varsity basketball team on a fast break against another team in the gymnasium. Here's a much earlier picture of the building. In the 1936 directory it says that this was the Port Huron High School gym, but in the 1934 directory it says it was the Monarch Amusement Company and also the Monarch Bowling Alley. So whether it was the same building or not, I don't know for sure, but it's a good possibility that it was, just judging from the date of this picture. I think it's important too that we remember how much space the McMorran complex took up. The red rectangle is the space that the complex itself took up. The blue horizontal lines are the streets that, if they were still there, would go right through the McMorran complex. Ontario Street on the top and Superior Street on the bottom. Superior Street was taken out when the jail was put in, but Ontario would have been taken out later for the McMorran complex. Second additional rectangle is the space that McMorran parking is taking up, and here we lose more of Ontario Street, and we also lose part of Park Street as well, which the little bit that's left now is called Andrew Murphy. So it was a very ambitious undertaking. Kitty corner from McMorran we find St. Clair Community College. Of course, formerly this was Port Huron High School. And as you can see here, sometimes it can look pretty busy. I think this particular time, though, it looks like a fire drill. They're all just waiting around to see what happens, I guess. High school has been at this location for a long time. This postcard here is shown shortly after it was built. This is the third high school at this location, built in 1908. And judging from the car in front of the school, it looked like this might have been in the early 1900s. This next picture here is a picture of the Watson Brothers Plumbing Company. They installed radiators at Port Huron High School in 1908. This postcard here might be a little earlier. It's got the horse and buggy out front of the high school. This photo here is of the young officers of the Port Huron High School Cadet Corps conducting their training sessions at the high school during their lunch hour. By 1918, America's involvement in World War I was already a reality. In 1925, this team here claimed the state championship. The team was not only undefeated, but also unscored upon, the first time ever for a Michigan Class A team. And what would football be without a band? The famed Big Red Marching Machine of Port Huron High School began in 1927. The uniforms shown here were purchased by the local Lions and Kiwanis clubs for the group's public appearances. This band's a far cry from the band of 1982 shown here. Much larger. The high school shown here was built in 1874, and it lasted for about 30 years until it was destroyed by fire in May of 1906. At the time, 300 students were attending school. This picture from the Port Huron Museum I always found interesting. The only problem is I could never figure out the buildings and their locations. And then I realized that the picture needs to be flipped horizontally to this view right here. Now the picture makes sense. You can see First Baptist steeple there on the right hand side, and as we go in for a closer look, we see the Port Huron High School, the very first one that was built at that location. This school was built in 1870, but it too was destroyed by fire in 1873, so it wasn't around very long. We don't have a picture of the very first high school built. That would have been on Court Street, just east of 7th Street. But we do have a picture of the first graduating class, a grand total of 4 students. And anyone could attend the graduation as long as they paid 25 cents. And right across the street from the high school was the St. Stephen's Church, and of course the school as well. This would have been on the northwest corner of 7th and Broad, or as it is now, McMorran. Note in this picture that the steeple or tower has a roof on it, which it didn't have in the more current pictures. Remember this picture of the high school? Well, if we look just to the right of it, we can see that St. Stephen's Church is there, so it's been around a long, long time. Alright, let's go back up to McMorran and Huron Avenue, on the opposite side of the street from the City Hall. This photo here is when it was Arena Sporting Goods. Before that, as long as I can remember, it was always a gas station. I remember a Shell gas station being there, but according to the city directory, several different gas stations have been there over the years. And note that the billboards are still there as well. Alright, let's go next door to this building. At one time, this is where Beard and Campbell store was. But before that, back in 1905, this is where Kerr of Kerr Simpson Funeral Home started his funeral business. Benjamin Kerr started his funeral home here on the corner of Superior and Broad Street as it was then known. The original location served only as an office because turn of the 20th century viewings and funerals were conducted in the home or church of the deceased. Across the street on the southwest corner was the armory. I haven't been able to find an actual picture of the armory other than unless it's this one here. This certainly looks like the building I passed every day on the way to school. In this aerial view, you can see the armory is right on the corner of Superior and McMorran, and right across the street from it you can see the gymnasium and the fire hall and the jail. But in the lower part there, that big building is the armory. Then as you go up the street while we're here, this building here is the old City Hall. Of course the turrets and tower are gone from the top, but you can see in the corners that rounded edges that are so distinctive for the City Hall. And in this photo here you can see the armory in the left hand bottom corner. It's always nice to see a color photo rather than black and white. In the next block on the corner of Ontario and McMorran, Mr. Kerr purchased a home in 1923 to establish the very first funeral home in the city. If you're scratching your head wondering where Ontario and McMorran is, it's at the entrance of the parking lot across the street from McMorran. The firm occupied the same building until 1965 when it moved to the present location on Elk Street at Pine Grove Avenue. Which is another interesting story. I was born in the parking lot there alongside the funeral home. But we'll get to that in another video. Alright, let's continue on McMorran on the east side of Huron Avenue, on the northwest corner of Michigan and McMorran. And here we see a familiar place to a lot of us. It's the old T&G restaurant. I had my first boughten cup of coffee here. My dad and I had breakfast, and he ordered me coffee, half and half milk, half coffee. On the other side of the intersection, we don't have any old pictures, but before Port Huron Paint was there, it was H&H Auto Sales for quite a while. And then on the other side, is where the Beard and Campbell lighting store was. Alright, let's mosey back to the main drag, Huron Avenue. This is the northwest corner of Andrew Murphy and Huron. This used to be Park Street before it was Andrew Murphy. Park Street ran all the way from Black River to St. Clair River originally. Years ago on this corner stood a magnificent building. Originally I think it was an armory, later became a furniture store. First it was called the Bear Block Furniture Store, and then later on it was called Howard Furniture Store, and that's what we see here. Even in the horse and buggy days, it was a pretty impressive building. The other two impressive buildings, the courthouse and the Maccabees building, were very difficult to see from the street level. The courthouse set back a ways from the street, so you couldn't see that. And the Howard Furniture basically was even with the Maccabee building, so it was hard to see that one too. But you could see the dome quite often. Unfortunately, in 1922, this beautiful building was destroyed by fire. Building and business that I remember growing up was this building here, Van Heften Drugs. And you can see it from this next picture at a little bit different angle. You can just catch the corner of it here. As you can see from this picture, the Maccabees building and the Howard Furniture Store took up most of the block, but in between there was a small space, just enough for a couple of small businesses. And this space was occupied over the years by various merchants, grocery stores, ice cream parlors, tailor shops, restaurants. But I think the one that most of us from my generation remembers is Safi's, or if you're from the more intellectual part of town, Safi's. And this was a coffee shop or a restaurant that was quite frequented by the young crowd, and well, actually by everybody. And now we come to the north end of the block, which is occupied by this corner here, which would be Bard and Huron Avenue, the southwest corner. This corner was occupied by the Knights of the Maccabees building. This building here shows the original building that was on this corner. It was later replaced by a very unique building, probably the most unusual building of Port Huron, because of the large dome and the smaller domes on the corner. This photo here gives you an idea how large that center dome actually was. This is an early postcard of the Maccabee building. Later on it was converted into a hotel, the Hotel Algonquin, as you see here. Notice the front signage here, and later in this postcard it was changed a little bit, maybe brought up to date a little bit more. Eventually all the domes were removed from the roof and the hotel fell into disrepair. It became apartments, but later on it was completely abandoned. And in January of 2000, the building was completely destroyed by fire. One more unique piece of architecture is removed from the Port Huron landscape. This concludes Part 6 of Port Huron Past and Present. In Part 7 we'll walk a little further up Huron Avenue and see what we can see.